spicy chai. Hi everyone, welcome to Cafe Libellis, where I, Kristen, talk about books in the most comfortable way I know possible. Today I'll be talking about The Shining by Stephen King. It was published in 1977 by Anchor Books, and in it, Jack Torrance and his family, his wife Wendy and his 5-year-old son Danny, move into the Overlook Hotel in Colorado because of Jack's job as its winter season caretaker. Now, they start off okay in the beginning, but as the winter continues on, strange things start to happen. And for some reason, they all revolve around Danny. Now, I went into this book practically blind. I knew nothing about Stephen King as an author. I'd read one book of his when I was 14. It was Under the Dome. Maybe not the best book for a 14-year-old to read, but you know, it was memorable. But I don't really remember much of King's writing from that book. I mostly remember just things that happened. And necrophilia. I do remember there's necrophilia. But I also knew nothing about the Shining movie. I'd never watched it. All I knew was that it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It had some iconic scenes, like the blood coming out of the elevator, or the twins in the hallway, or Jack Nicholson screaming, "Here's Johnny." But that's about it. That's really all I knew about it. And so I really think that helped my experience, not knowing too much about this book in general and not knowing about King's writing style. I was immediately struck by the use of parentheticals and the unique style that King wrote in, especially with respect to characters' thoughts. And I was also struck by some of the language he used, not as much in a good way. With respect to the parentheticals, it was an amazing tool to add to characters' thoughts and reactions. It added an interesting and clear dynamic to the characters' thoughts and intentions. And there's this one passage early on in the book that I think really illustrates why this writing style is really effective for what it does. I really, really liked that, and it's consistent throughout the book. The use is not, I wouldn't say liberal, but when he does use it, it's extremely useful and does its job in making you see how the character sees themselves versus who they really are, in a sense. And so I really think, especially with the themes of this book, that tool and the use of parentheticals and character thought, excellent. I loved it. The language, on the other hand, sometimes had a sense of being too grandiose for the situation it was used in. I think there are some points, not a whole lot, but some points in the book where it feels like King just kind of brought out a thesaurus and looked for the prettiest word he can find. And sometimes it doesn't really fit with the tone that the passage is going for. So that was a little off-putting sometimes, and it kind of took me out of the book because I'd just be like, oh, that's an interesting word to use. But, you know, not a major drawback or anything, just something I noticed. The other technical parts of this book that really shine is King's use of pacing and suspense. Now, obviously, King is well regarded for his suspense and his horror, but I don't think people really talk a lot about why he's so reputable in that regard. Reading The Shining, I now realize why he's so good at it and why people love it. His pacing is really fast, but he gives just enough breathing time to develop characters in between important events. And because of that character development, it's pretty simple most of the time. It's maybe just a trip to the drugstore or going down to the library or a quick talk in the bedroom. But these little moments in between large moments of suspense really help cement the characters and get us to care about them and get us to care about what happens to them in this book. So when these suspenseful and intense moments happen, that added horror is thrown in. We care about what happens to the characters. We want them to come out okay. And so we become even more invested and the suspense is made that much more effective. It's really, really good. The setup for some of these events is pretty obvious, but at the same time, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's perfectly effective to have some obvious setup. And in some ways it helps, in some ways it doesn't matter. I never felt that it fully detracted from the experience of the event. Technical things aside, the true horror shines in the character development, especially that of Jack Torrance. In the beginning, you are hooked by Jack. You start with his thoughts, you start with his interactions with a different character. And through King's use of parentheticals, you get to see his inner thoughts and also things that he's trying to hide from himself. And you immediately tell that there's going to be some important development with Jack throughout this book. I mean, of course there is. He's the main character. But the writing style and the way Jack himself is written, you know that there's going to be some sort of character conflict within him. And I eat that stuff up. I think that's great. And of course, there is that character conflict and tension within Jack that builds. And as the book goes on, it's almost grotesquely interesting to watch his degradation as a person. It's so sad because you know that he's trying really hard to be a good person and to be someone he is proud of and who can protect his family and provide for them. And yet you see him fall deeper and deeper into this darker aspect of himself. Part of it is because of the hotel, but part of it is also Jack himself. And that's really, it's such a good descent into madness. It's done so well, in my opinion, that is really what makes the horror of the book real. And I think that's what King was going for. A lot of his character development was around Jack and the people he loves, but that is also for Jack to be able to have a larger effect when he descends, and also as part of Jack's descent as well. It's very well done, in my opinion, very subtle, very gradual, and it was great to watch. Really, really sad, but just fantastic to watch. And so there's so much to unpack with Jack Torrance and his character development that I'm actually going to make a separate video all about it. I'm going to compare Jack and Wendy, who are both very flawed characters, but compare how they deal with their faults and flaws and why the way they approach their more negative aspects, their darker sides, that affects how they come out at the end of the book. Beyond Jack Torrance, I think King also did an excellent job of characterizing and taking care of Wendy and Danny as characters. You know, the book is called The Shining, and Danny is the one who has this shining ability. And so you think that this book is about him. In some ways it is. Danny is the one who has to deal with a lot of the things going on in the Overlook. A large portion of the plot revolves around him. And so not only is this a book about Jack's descent into madness, this is also a sad coming of age story for Danny. It's really strange looking back after reading the book, because as you read, you're so engrossed by Jack. But looking back and seeing Danny grow and looking at why he had to grow is also heartbreaking. The things he has to go through and live through, and the things he has to do alone for the most part, is really just, it's really sad. It brings it home after you finish the book that, wow, that sucked for Danny, like, to put it mildly. And you just want to give him a hug afterwards and tell him he'll be okay. I don't think he will, because that stuff is traumatizing, and you don't come out of that unscathed. But you really feel for him. Wendy as well is a very interesting character, not only because she's a kind of foil for Jack, but also in how strong she becomes. In the beginning of the book, it's not that she's not a strong person, but she's kind of more in the background. She doesn't really do a whole lot except follow Jack and take care of Danny. But by the end of the book, you see her really going two extremes that, you know, only a mother would to protect her child. And you know through the course of the book how she comes to become that strong. It's not something that's just like, oh, her mother's instinct took over and she was able to do this and that. No, she's built throughout the book, and you see the things she thinks and the choices she makes that lead up to her making these decisions at the end that, you know, ultimately change the outcome of the book. And so it's really encouraging to see somebody grow out of this. She is, of course, very scarred by the experience and will never be the same again. But you have a sense that she's going to be okay. And I think that is really just a testament to King's ability to build up these characters to the point where, you know, at the end, without really reading the sequel or reading any other, you know, inside author's notes or something, that these characters, they'll survive. Wendy's probably going to be okay for the most part, as long as she has Danny. Danny is probably not going to be okay as soon as Wendy leaves. But, you know, you kind of have a sense of where they're going in life after this. And I really, really like that. So overall, I give this book an 8 out of 10. It was a fantastic read. And the characters really made the difference for me. The events themselves were very suspenseful. The pacing was quick. And I think this is a book that everybody should read. I think it has a lot to teach, a lot to show. And for that reason alone, I highly recommend reading this. I'm going to watch the movie at some point, but I doubt that it will affect me the same way. There's always a difference in vision and in message and theme between a book and a movie if the book's author is not involved with the creative process of the movie. And as far as I know, King and Kubrick did not work together during The Shining movie. So I'll be interested to see what Kubrick got out of the book and what themes he really wanted to express and what he liked about it. But I'm really glad that I read it, and I hope you guys read it too. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As I said earlier, there's going to be a video coming out of an analysis of Jack's descent into madness and his foil, Wendy. So look forward to that, and thanks for eavesdropping. I hope I catch you again.